Okay, so in this case study, we're going to go through an example of somebody I worked with. But try to breeze through this, keep it pretty quick. But just kind of starting off, this is not meant to be like me explaining something and say, if you're dealing with these issues, this is what you should do. This is strictly meant to just be an example of somebody who was dealing. I'll go through the symptoms he was dealing with, the issues we identified, how we went through that process. Meant to be a framework. If you try to copy and paste, whether it's from this, whether it's from some thread you see online, whatever it is, if you just try to copy and paste generalized advice, it's very unlikely that that's going to work perfectly for you. And the reason for that is everybody's situation is different. When it comes to digestive issues, every digestive issue has overlapping symptoms with other issues. So if you're guessing just based on your symptoms, there's a very good chance you could be completely wrong. This is why a lot of doctors who diagnose people with IBS without doing any testing whatsoever, there's never going to be accurate information on this, but I would estimate probably 60 to 70% of those diagnoses are misdiagnosed. It's very, very difficult to be 100% accurate with these things, given the fact that every single issue just about has overlapping symptoms. Also, on top of that, this is not meant to be medical advice. Again, this is just me going through an example of a client that I worked with. These are the issues he dealt with. These are the outcomes he got. This is how we got it. So he was dealing with dysbiosis. He had run some testing in the past. We knew he had dysbiosis, but it was fairly limited. It was like one of the biome tests that basically just kind of keeps it very high level. They don't give you any like actionable, very specific information in the way that like a GI map or a GI effects test would. But we knew there were some issues going on there. He was dealing with issues digesting food. So he had sensitivities and intolerances, like certain foods he would eat. He would get gas and bloating, burning sensation or reflux. And there really was no pattern there. It was just like kind of randomly. Sometimes these foods would be fine. Sometimes these foods would cause issues, but he wasn't digesting well, and he would get gas and bloating pretty frequently. It was zapping his energy too. So usually when you eat food, your body digests it, you get these nutrients, you get more energy. It was the opposite for him. He wasn't digesting these foods well, so it was taking a lot of energy for his body to try to digest well. And every time he would get irritation and an immune response. So his body is going into these flare ups and inflammation levels are going higher, and it's just sequestering that energy away towards his immune system, towards these inflammation flare ups. So it was also causing him to get sick more frequently. So if you have 70% of your immune cells in your digestive tract and you're dealing with dysbiosis or you're dealing with other digestive issues, it's very likely that that is going to affect your immune system, especially if it's something you've been dealing with for a while. So that was something he was dealing with. Sleep was being disrupted. He was waking up in the middle of the night pretty frequently. But even beyond that, just the quality of his sleep, even if he didn't wake up in the middle of the night, quality of his sleep wasn't there. He was trying to get 7 to 8 hours, but he would wake up not feeling well rested. So that was something we needed to focus on. One of the biggest issues for him actually was anxiety and mood instability. So he was never somebody who dealt with anxiety, mood, swings or depression or anything like that. But when he started dealing with these issues, he started noticing that, and that was affecting the reason he reached out and the reason he was taking this more seriously is it was starting to affect his work. It was affecting his relationships, like trying to go out and meet people and date. And, while you're super irritable or you're having mood swings, it's not the easiest thing to do. So that was one of the biggest issues he was dealing with. He had these issues for over 10 years. They were progressively getting worse. He had tried. It wasn't that he was not trying anything. It wasn't that he wasn't staying consistent. It was just he wasn't focusing on the right things because he didn't have the time to put into making sure he had identified the issues, making sure he had the right protocols, and he was doing all the right things here. Worked a really demanding job, like 70, 80 hours a week sometimes, very high stress levels, which was contributing to some of these issues, but also holding him back from having the time, the energy, and the resources to put into fixing these issues, which is how we got connected. So the process we went through here, first and foremost, we had to get a grasp on where things were at. We had to understand, like, if you deal with symptoms like gas and bloating, but you don't know what causes them. It's just kind of comes and goes randomly. You need to have a better understanding of what's really going on here. So the way that I do this with most people is just write things down. Take a notebook with you to work, do it on your phone, do it on the notes app on your phone, like whatever is easiest for you, just write down throughout the day. You're having an anxiety attack, or you ate lunch at 11 o'clock and then 12:30, you're starting to feel this symptom, or I woke up in the morning, this is how I'm feeling. Just jotting things down so that you can go back and look at that and see, okay, yesterday at this time, I was dealing with this symptom. like an hour before that at work, we had something super stressful happen. Like you can start to piece together the puzzle and get a little bit of a better understanding of what's going on. For most people, we're all busy. We got a million things going on. For you to try to remember everything that happened and this little thing that might have caused that, it's very difficult to do that. Taking 2 seconds to write something down in your phone or in a notebook doesn't take a lot of time, helps a lot. So that is something we did. We were also just analyzing like his diet. So for example, he was only doing 1 to 2 meals a day, which means he was eating like 1,500 calories a sitting. Sometimes if you have disrupted digestion, you're not going to be digesting 1,500 or more calories in one sitting very well. 99% of people are not. There was also some foods he was eating. Like for the most part, his diet was pretty clean, but there were some foods he was eating that just were not the best, not the easiest to digest with these issues he had. So like raw veggies, nuts and seeds, some condiments and sauces and stuff like that. He was eating out a decent amount. So there were some adjustments we needed to make on that front, as well as, like I said, smaller meals, eating more often instead of trying to take down so many calories in one sitting. Macronutrient levels. When we found the issues, he was dealing with pathogens, the levels of carbohydrates and more specifically like sugars and starches that he was consuming was directly making it harder to get rid of these issues or contributing to them, given what some of these pathogens can feed off of. So that was something we needed to work on a bit, and micronutrient gaps, specifically how much he was getting through his diet, but also through the testing that we ran. We saw several deficiencies, so we needed to really make some changes there. This is a good point to mention that I think for a lot of people, using a meal tracking app is invaluable. I guarantee you're unable to calculate in your head how much vitamin B1 you're getting on a daily or weekly basis. If you have any idea if you're getting enough of it, or zinc or calcium. When you're healthy, I'm not promoting like you have to track your meals all the time and understand exactly how much you're getting. But when you're dealing with health issues, and especially if you're trying to address deficiencies and you have things like leaky gut and you want to make sure you're getting enough of nutrients that are important for addressing that, it's really, really helpful, if not essential, to have some idea of where these levels are at. So that was something we did that helped a lot. He was using supplements. He was supplementing like individual nutrients for years and had no idea where the levels were at in his body. He really didn't have a strategy behind it. It was just strictly because he had seen, this person talked about this. Like if you have leaky gut, you should take this. If you have SIBO, you should take this. And while those things could be helpful, you may or may not need it. If you have plenty of zinc and you're not deficient in zinc and you supplement a bunch of zinc, that doesn't make much sense, especially in his case, he was doing it without copper. His copper levels were pretty low. So this was just one example, but there were several nutrients that he was supplementing for a very long time. No cycling, no real strategy behind it, many of which were probably creating more issues than they were solving. The lifestyle side of things, I would say, is probably the best. A lot of people, it's just intuitive. You need to get good sleep. You need to manage your stress, all of these things. But sometimes doing your best isn't enough. Like in his case, he was trying to get good sleep. He was trying to manage his stress, but it was still not where it needed to be, given how important these are. Poor sleep, your gut lining, the turnover of the cells in your gut lining, your immune system function, microbiome composition. If you're really stressed out, if you're getting terrible sleep, those are directly affected by that. Your circadian rhythms affect everything from digestive enzyme secretion to microbiome composition. We really needed to make some improvements here. So he's in a big city, very, very busy. We were literally scheduling out like, when will you have a 5 or 10 minute break during the day to be able to step outside and get 8 minutes of sunlight? That's how busy and complicated his day-to-day routine was. So that's what we had to do to make that happen. But we did, and it was helping a lot with his sleep, with his stress, just noticeable improvements from these three, small things that we were focusing on. Tracking progression here. So like I said, writing things down, but tracking it as we move forward. Like, how is this affecting this? You started doing this. Okay, it's causing this. Just gives you a better understanding of where you're at in this process. Everybody's body handles these processes differently. Having a track record, being able to look back at how things have gone over the last few days, over the last few weeks, is invaluable information. We were also running testing. So we ran some blood work, we ran some stool testing. Most of this, I would say, were downstream effects of the issues he was dealing with. So like metabolic disruptions, low levels of short chain fatty acids, and imbalances in microbiome were likely playing a major role in that. hormonal imbalances, the leaky gut, the dysbiosis playing a big role there. Disrupted liver function, there was probably a few things contributing to this. Admittedly, drank a decent amount of alcohol, and just some other lifestyle factors that probably played a role there, but also the fact that he had been dealing with pathogen overgrowth and exposure to toxins and wasn't really going through a process to properly address those. It's likely putting some pressure on his liver. This was kind of manifesting in poor digestion of fats, bile flow issues, bile production issues, which we were seeing on the digestive side as well. Immune system, lower white blood cells, microbiome imbalances. So, like I said before, there were several pathogens that were showing up. And there was also just general imbalances here. So some commensal bacteria abnormally high, some extremely low, especially short chain fatty acid producing bacteria, which, like I said before, was likely playing a role in some of the metabolic disruptions he was dealing with. Zonulin levels are really high, indication of leaky gut, and then numerous nutrient deficiencies. Zinc wasn't super, super bad because he had been supplementing it, but it was a little bit lower. After we went through this kind of preparation, focusing on these things up here, had the test results, we know what we need to focus on, we got our work cut out for us. This is how we went about that. So it's important to focus on foundational things first. What I mean by that is if he's not having regular bowel movements, which he wasn't, and you try to go through a detox, you try to kill off pathogens, you got biofilm being broken up, you got endotoxins being released, but you're not having regular bowel movements, this stuff's just getting stuck in there. It can be reabsorbed, it can be recirculating throughout your body, it can create all kinds of issues. So we really needed to focus on regulating bowel movements up front before going through that detox. Some of the indications from his blood work of stress on his liver, like I said, bile flow or bile production issues, not digesting fats well. These are some of the important things we needed to focus on up front, not just because of the digestion of fats, but bile is something that is heavily used in this detoxification process and moving some of these substances through the body and helping get rid of them. Immune system support. So he, again, had been dealing with this for years. His immune system had been basically in overdrive for years, really high levels of secretory IgA. Your immune system is very important for fighting off pathogens and getting rid of harmful substances in the body. So supporting that, making sure, we're moving things in the right direction in terms of detox pathways, regular bowel movements, liver function, gallbladder function, as well as immune system function, so that when you get to that detox, you're in a better position to actually be able to succeed there. The last thing here in terms of like the preparation or the foundational things was gut lining. So if he's dealing with really high levels of zonulin, leaky gut, and you start that detox, you start killing off some of these pathogens, what you don't want to happen is these toxins, these harmful substances getting into the bloodstream, and now they become a systemic issue. So what we did is focus on several things up front that can help re-strengthen his gut lining. I posted a lot about different things that can be helpful here. Marshmallow root, licorice root, different teas and natural ways to kind of support the gut lining, as well as butyrate. So short chain fatty acid production was pretty low in his test results. This is something you can supplement that can be helpful for that specifically, but it's also very helpful for gut lining, as well as immune system function. So that was something we used. We used colostrum, lactoferrin, another thing that can be helpful there. So utilizing a few different things to support immune system, gut lining, liver function, things like milk thistle, the bile disruptions, using Tudga was extremely helpful here. But these were important before that kind of detox and everything else. When we got to that point where we were ready to start addressing those issues, we focused on the biofilms first and foremost. Several of these are known antibiotic resistant biofilm forming pathogens. So we wanted to go through several weeks of preparing, breaking down biofilms, making sure we can actually clear these things out. Then using more targeted antipathogenic substances, things like neem, black seed oil, allicin. It really depends on the type of pathogen. I think this is really important for people to understand is if you have Candida, if you have H. pylori, it depends on what you have, what you should be using should be based on that. The levels, the dosage, how long you're using them for should all be based on your situation, which is exactly what we did here. Since he had several types of overgrowth, we were using several types of antimicrobials, kind of working synergistically here, using binders to help clear some of this stuff out. With the repopulating, I've posted about this a decent amount. I'm not a fan of probiotics for several reasons. One, first and foremost, most of them are just not good. They're just not good products. There's tons of studies showing all kinds of issues with them. The labeling is inaccurate. The count. So the difference between fermented foods, probiotics have substantially more quantity, but the quality, or sorry, the diversity of them, the number of different strains and things that are in there are significantly lower than fermented foods, where you could have 50 plus strains in kefir, for example. So if the trade-off there is you get more from probiotics, but when you run studies on probiotics, the count in there is actually substantially different than what's on the actual label. You don't really know what you're getting, and you don't know to what extent it is more beneficial because you're getting more strains of probiotics through a supplement. If that labeling isn't accurate, you just don't know. There's been contamination with them. It's just there's a lot of problems with them. I personally, with my own issues and every client I've worked with, I have had far more success with fermented foods, utilizing fermented foods and prebiotics through the diet to repopulate, to increase the levels of probiotics, to increase the diversity of your microbiome. There are situations if somebody has like histamine issues, for example, where you could use a probiotic supplement. I think it could be very helpful. Or if you're extremely deficient in a very specific commensal bacteria and you supplement with that, I think that makes sense. But if your approach to rebalance your microbiome is using one probiotic supplement that has 2 or 3 strains of probiotics, it's just not going to get you the outcome that you think it is. And in some situations could actually make it worse. So we were using fermented foods. We were also focusing on nutrients that regulate his microbiome, things like magnesium, vitamin K, nutrients that regulate your immune system, indirectly help regulate the microbiome, is what we focused on there. Once we'd gotten through all that, it was still important to focus on gut lining and inflammation and bolstering immune system function. We did some of that up front, but those issues that we were going through with the detox were still there. So there was still work to do. We still focused on that for quite a bit, actually, after we had gone through the actual detoxification. But this is the point we were actually able to start making some progress, building the resiliency back up, building the nutrient levels back up, and kind of really getting things back to normal at this point. Timing wise, it took a while. So what I think is really important to understand here is like this prep, these things that we focused on actually up here, the very, very basic things, the structure of his diet and all that, that was 2-3 weeks of focusing on that, going through regulating bowel movements, focusing on gut lining, immune system support, all of that. Another like 3-4 weeks of really thoroughly going through and focusing on these things. Then targeting the pathogens directly, going through and rebalancing his microbiome. So to expect like going through a process like this, I think people expect to go through it way too quickly. There is no preparation there. It ends up overwhelming liver function, or they're already dealing with disrupted bowel movements and they try to go through some intense detox and everything just gets backed up and it can make the situation much, much worse. So it's important, I think, again, depending on your situation, like this timing and everything was based on his, but it's important to break things up into chunks, to focus on the foundational things first that affect everything else. And then you kind of bite off one piece at a time. Given that it's not realistic to expect your symptoms to be drastically improved, like 3 weeks into this process. And I think a lot of people will get started with something. They're 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, they're not seeing the improvement that they're hoping for. And so they think something's wrong or they need to switch or they make some adjustments. If you have the best protocol in the world, but you just don't give it the commitment or the time that it needs to actually be effective, you're never going to see outcomes from it. So it's really important to have realistic expectations here. And that's exactly what happened here. I mean, he was seeing some improvement as we went through the process. It wasn't like it was just nothing until the very end, but it wasn't substantial. Like he was still dealing with these symptoms throughout the whole process until once we got through the detox, things had, started to noticeably improve. But it still took time, and it was just gradual, kind of moving in the right direction at that point, eventually getting to the point where it's like, okay, it's been 2 days I haven't had symptoms. All right, it's been 4 days I haven't had symptoms. And eventually they just kind of fade away, which is how, like, again, everybody's different. Everybody's body handles this process differently. But I would say 60% of the people I work with, it's very similar to that. They don't see substantial improvement until they get towards the end of that process. And in this case was over 4 months from start to finish. So about 3.5 months in was when he was really starting to see like substantial, sustainable, lasting improvement. If he had just given up after like a month, he wouldn't have gotten through it. He wouldn't have seen the results there. But improvements in symptoms, sleep was improving, mood stability again, like feeling like himself again. This stuff validated through the testing as well. So nutrient levels were improved. There was still some work to do there. With some of this stuff, it's downstream effects. Like you have imbalanced microbiome, it's disrupting your digestion. The disrupted digestion affects nutrient levels. You develop nutrient deficiencies. Those nutrient deficiencies affect, for some people, it's skin. Some people, there's downstream levels to these issues. So with the nutrient levels, we were able to make some improvements there, but he still definitely needed to continue focusing on that and building those levels back up. Depending on where, how deficient you are, it could take months to build levels back up, supplementation, focusing on it through your diet, but nonetheless in a much better position there. HDL cholesterol levels improved, liver function, liver enzymes in a much, much better position, cortisol levels much, much better. I think this part of this was the effects that these issues were having, but also the work that we were doing on focusing on managing his stress and just, being much better about that. Thyroid function, I think I forgot to mention before, he was like borderline hypothyroid, significantly better, not perfect yet, but significantly better than it was before. Feeling better too. Microbiome, running the stool test again, things back in balance, immune system function, the different metrics that, like secretory IgA, everything's looking much, much better. Digestion, products of protein breakdown, that, you're not seeing partially undigested foods and things like that in the stool. And then the testosterone levels, which was awesome because this was his libido, like just motivation levels, just really not feeling like himself at all coming into this process. And we didn't use a single testosterone boosting supplement. I posted about this with myself as well. Mine increased 55% over the course of, I think it was like 4 or 5 months, going through a very similar process as this. I was dealing with leaky gut, I was dealing with microbiome imbalances, I had candida overgrowth, all kinds of things going on, and just simply addressing those issues that were causing those levels to be lower than they should have been popped that up significantly. Same thing in his case. There was no boosting it through supplements or TRT or anything like that. It was just simply fixing why it was low in the first place. So, like I said at the beginning, this is just meant to be an overview of the issues he was dealing with, the process we went through, just to, I guess, help see how we think about this. How do we identify the issues? How do we break it up into the different chunks? Like, we had to focus on bowel movement regulation, liver function. These things had to be in a better position before we could make progress with the pathogens. And in order to make progress with like gut lining and inflammation and immune system function and get everything back to normal there, we had to address the issues with the pathogen. So if we tried to just do it all at once, or if we didn't do it in that order, he was not going to see the results that he saw here. The second most important piece, I would say, is the fact that it was based on his situation. We did testing. We saw, okay, this is specifically what is causing your issues. We did a thorough analysis of like his symptoms, keeping track of things, writing notes. So we weren't just guessing based on, there's some Twitter thread out there that says if you have bloating and reflux, this is the cause of it. And if you have that, then you need to use this. That stuff might help get you going in the right direction, but it's never going to be the way to get lasting results. You always need to dig deeper, be sure that the issues you're dealing with are what you think they are, and then you kind of go through a process to address that. I 100% understand testing is expensive. Not everybody can afford it. I think if you can sacrifice other areas, entertainment or money you're spending in other areas, it is well worth it. It helps a lot. But even if you can't, just going through, being really thorough with analyzing your current diet, analyzing your symptoms, analyzing what does my daily routine look like, what things am I doing that might be contributing to my stress levels, or where can I make improvements with circadian rhythm and light exposure. It's just really important to have data and have an understanding of what's going on in order to understand what you should be doing, because I cannot tell you how many times I have worked with somebody or talked to somebody who's like, it's been 5 years, it's been 10 years, I've been dealing with these issues, I've tried everything, nothing is working. It's not that they're not putting in the effort, it's not that they're lazy, it's just simply they're focusing on the wrong things. They just have not figured out what is the actual true root cause or what are the different factors involved. They're just hyper focused on one specific thing and they're not going about it the right way. So again, hopefully this helps as a framework or an understanding of how we did that. If you're looking for more information like this, I do have a newsletter. I send out emails every single week, talk about stuff like this, examples of clients, case studies, just random topics and things that I think will be helpful for people in these situations. If you're looking for direct help, I work with people as well, both consultation calls and ongoing coaching. So if you're interested in that, shoot me a DM. I'm happy to talk about it. If you want to join my newsletter, you can find I usually post. There should be a link on my profile. You can join there. So hopefully this is helpful. Hope you guys are able to make some progress with whatever the issues are that you're dealing with. If there's any way I can help, just general questions or anything, always feel free to shoot me a DM.